I'm Eric from Longbox Review.
I'm Peter from the Daily Rios, and this is episode 25 of Eric and Peter's Legion Project Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Legion Project Podcast. This is Peter.
And this is Eric.
And we are back for the Legion Project Podcast. As we mentioned, this is episode 25, which means we're covering issue 25, which means we are now starting the third year of the Baxter series run. And we just celebrated, in the gap between the two episodes, this episode and last episode, we just celebrated our own third anniversary. So happy 3 years, Eric.
Yeah, same to you, Peter. This has been such a fun project for us. I at least from my perspective, anyway. The response from the listeners has always been very gracious and entertaining and informative. And so I am looking forward to what the third year of the show and these set of issues will reveal to me personally, because like I said, these are new to me, these stories, these issues. So I'm discovering along with the listeners who may be new to this series.
Yeah, I'm actually in kind of like the same position a tiny bit here. As we wrap up the Censor Girl mystery in I think 2 more issues, after that, there are some storylines that I know that I've read, but there's some in-between stuff that, as I look at the covers, I kind of go, I have no idea what's going on the inside there. So, as familiar as I was of year 2 of the Baxter run, and everything that I learned about year 1 from rereading it, this is going to be fun to kind of go along uncharted territory, I guess, for both of us in one way or another. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to that. That should be a lot of fun. I mean, because there's, again, as we set this up way back in episode 1. I think our love of the Legion of Superheroes obviously is very strong. They're a series of characters and titles that we want to read, but I often say that there are people out there who just have a greater in-depth knowledge than I do. There are Legion experts that can quote you story chapter titles and issue numbers and first appearances and the exact order of how the Legion, how members joined, and I have a great knowledge of what I've read, but there's a lot that I haven't read. So I think the part of the fun of, maybe that's why we initially called it a project, is because it's an ongoing thing, right? We're learning a lot about the characters and the stories that we're reading now, but I'm also really learning about the history of the Legion through all of this too.
Yeah, it reading this stuff, it affords me the opportunity quite often here. I'm finding as we go through these issues, little things will just kind of pop up, and it's not necessarily directly relating to the issue that we're covering. Like, for example, today, for today's episode, we're going to take a look at an entry in Who's Who for one of the Legionnaires, and that prompted me to go back and look at a bunch of adventure comics appearances of the Legion just because I wanted to find out this one little detail. And so I basically went through 2 omnibuy that I have,
Oh my.
searching for this stuff. Yeah, just real quick, flipping through the pages to find appearances of this character. But it was just such a neat. I don't know. I enjoy that kind of stuff. So this has been a lot of fun in a lot of different ways.
Good. And there has been some time since our last episode, which is obviously nothing new to the Legion project. I have moved yet again. Anybody who listens to the Daily Rios, so I am in a new location. I remember recording another Legion project a while back, 2 years back, sort of saying the same thing. I don't know what the acoustics are going to sound like. There might be a barking dog. There might be traffic. There might be something. Who knows? I don't know. I'm still on my on a loaner laptop here, so a lot of variables. So please forgive any sort of audio stuff on my end. Still working all that stuff out, but at least we get a chance to sit here and talk, which is fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like I need to apologize to some degree, because part of the length of time between these episodes was I had a bike accident back in early September that delayed Peter and myself getting together to record this episode. So anyway, I talk about that on one of my Gutters episodes. That's in the feed now, but yeah, it's been an interesting at least a month, but it was longer than that. I can't remember when we last recorded the last Legion episode, Peter.
I mean, the last Legion episode dropped like at the beginning of August, so it might even have been in July.
It was in July. Yeah. Ooh, it's. I could hear Daryl Taylor right now. Where's my episode?
Daryl, and also one of the another listener on Twitter, who's been really great, Chris Matthews, who posted a link to some really great Legion resource stuff, but also clamoring for this next episode. So we'll dedicate this one. We dedicated one for Daryl before. We'll dedicate this one to Chris. Chris is hankering for some Legion talk, as are we. Yeah. Believe me, I'm sure both Eric and I, we're right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
The only other preamble thing I have, just so we can get into the issue, is sometime around when San Diego had their Comic-Con at Home set of videos on YouTube, we recorded an episode with George over at the Meanwhile at the podcast. That would be episode 66. It was released back in August, talking about a whole bunch of stuff, talking about San Diego and comics and conventions in general, but then also some Star Trek talk. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, you and I getting to talk about other things outside of the Legion universe.
Yeah.
And it's always fun to be able to play in, George's sandbox.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, anytime I get to talk to my friends, my online friends, the people I only interact with online, and talk about my favorite things in life, I will jump at that chance.
Shall we jump into Legion of Superheroes issue number 25?
All right. This issue is titled Revelation, and this is written by Paul Levitz, with Greg LaRocque and Mike DiCarlo as artists, along with an inking assist from Arn Starr. I believe it's the second inking assist issue. John Costanza continues as letterer, Carl Gafford as colorist, and Karen Berger as editor, with a cover by Steve Liedel and Ed Hannigan. So, issue 25. The Emerald Empress addresses her new Fatal Five: Persuader, Flare, Caress, and another female member. But who could it be? Near Earth, Brainy leads a group of Legionnaires to find the just-departed Censor Girl from last issue. At the Metropolis spaceport, White Witch, Element Lad, and Lightning Lass are transmuting an emerald in an attempt to lure the Emerald Empress into a rather silly-looking science police trap. Censor Girl's trail leads Dawnstar and the others to Shanghala, the Legion cemetery, but they do not find the missing Legionnaire. Instead, Brainiac 5 is nearly crispy fried by a vengeful Mono. Later, Dawnstar determines that once Censor Girl arrived on Shanghala, it is though she ceased to exist. Colossal Boy, Dream Girl, and some others arrive at planet Stratus looking for the missing Legion Academy member Mentala. They are swiftly attacked by the Fatal Five and a fight ensues. Just as Censor Girl arrives, we shift back to Earth where Element Lad seeks Saturn Girl's counsel where Censor Girl is concerned, and Imra reveals to Jan that she was already a Legionnaire. Back on Stratus, Censor Girl aids the Legionnaires, but the tide turns when Mentala, the fifth member of the Fatal Five, appears. The Emerald Empress then overpowers Censor Girl and finally reveals to all who she really is. And do we finally get to say it, Peter?
Go ahead, say it. Say it.
It's Princess Projectra.
Queen Projectra at this point, right?
Oh, that's very true. Very well. Maybe.
Maybe.
But yeah, she was crowned queen the last time, I think, around the last time that we saw her. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Maybe we
remember.
should just refer to her as Projectra.
Right. Which was smart. Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Let's see. Can we talk about the covers first without actually giving our thoughts to the story? I want to save that. I want to savor your reactions.
All right.
So let's talk about the two covers. We have Legion of Superheroes 25, obviously, as you mentioned, with Lido and Ed Hannigan. And then we have Tales of the Legion of Superheroes, issue number 350, more or less, you could say even like an anniversary.
Yeah. It normally would have been had this not just been a reprint comic.
Right. And that's depicting a fight scene also by Ed Hannigan, this time with DiCarlo on inks. So what are your thoughts on the covers?
Well, okay. So I mean, they both covers reveal or show something that more or less is depicted in the issue. So I have complained before about certain covers in the recent past how they were not fulfilling the promise that they show on the cover, right? But this is, I mean, the Legion 25 cover is very thematic, I'll say. You know, we get a reveal. Well, we get an unmasking, I should say, of of Censor Girl. Now I'm gonna screw that up all the time. By the Emerald Empress, which is what happens in here, just not in the way it's depicted. But it's, you know, it's very stark in the with the black background and the spotlight. I mean, it's like I said, it's very thematic in the way that it's showing the events that occur here, and then you get the classic Legion floating head reactions that we've seen on many a Legion comic book cover. So I like that callback to you know, the past Legion lore, or what's a better word than lore, but and then just the enticement, the tease, if you will, of Censor Girl being unmasked on that cover. So I really like that. I mean, if I had been perusing the stands at the comic book shop back then, and I'm sure I did, you know, why I didn't buy this book, I don't know. Even up to this point, 3 years into the run, I'm like, why wasn't I buying this book? Because I didn't get the tail stuff either. So I think I just eventually dropped it at this point, Peter, which seems very weird to me. But that cover now to me just screams, you got to buy me. even without the text that's underneath the title there, the comic title, finally Sensor Girl revealed. Well, we don't need that actually. We see it, so I don't know why they put that on there.
I'd like that I wonder if they obviously did this on purpose, that they kept Sensor Girl's hair yellow, blonde,
Mm-hmm.
even though the mask is ripped off for that one last little,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, could it still be Supergirl?
That's right. That's right.
For any reader out there who was hoping among, that post-crisis that she still existed. And there's things about, I think what you said is right. The design of the cover, you got Ed Hannigan, right? And I don't know the complete history of Ed Hannigan, but I know when you get an Ed Hannigan cover, there's a design sense to it. Not that they're all familiar, just that I think Ed Hannigan was really good at cover design in the sense of grabbing your attention, putting the focus on a certain thing. Sometimes, it's not like when you see like a Sienkiewicz cover or a Perez cover and you're like, okay, that's a Perez cover. There's just something about, obviously Ed Hannigan's name is all over a bunch of DC titles. So I don't know if his title was like some kind of art director at the time or whatever. And then to get his name on Tales 350 and, clearly depicting a scene that's inside the book. It's not necessary. Like, nothing really jumps out at me about 350. I certainly don't prefer it over issue 25. I think what's kind of funny is that the little Sensor Girl nod, revealed at last, Sensor Girl's secret, is so tiny. It's all up in the corner, but it is up by the logo, which if these things are hanging out on a rack or even a spinner rack, all you're really going to see is the top third.
Yeah.
So that's smart, if tiny.
Yeah. My thought on that was initially was well, first of all, I love that Tales 350 cover too, because it's again like issue 25. It's kind of a classic Legion cover because it's just a battle scene between them and one of their major nemesis, the Fatal Five, and it's very well done. Hannigan and DiCarlo do an excellent job here on this. I don't have any complaints really about it, but initially I was thinking, well, but it's not. The fight isn't really the point of the issue. The point of the issue is the reveal of Sensor Girl, and yet, as you pointed out, she's in this, the upper right corner of the cover, and so detracts from that important event in the issue. But then I thought later, well, maybe that's on purpose because this is a reprint issue, and the reveal has already happened a year ago. And, it's not as a prevalent an event as it was. And so to sell the issue more, perhaps, they depict this fight scene between the Legion and the Fatal Five instead. So I don't know, maybe marketing-wise, that's a much better approach.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that a couple times on some of the Tales covers where the focus is on something different, obviously, than the first time the cover was designed. But then we've also remarked, they chose to focus on that this time. Whether it had to do with like Supergirl's death in the Crisis or something else. So yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense. I think the ink's a little, I don't know if DiCarlo's inking over Hannigan is all that stellar. It comes across, like especially in the biceps, the muscle work in Persuader and Colossal Boy. There's something. It's like when Greg Theakston inks Jack Kirby, where it feels very thick, and it feels makes them look almost like toys. The figures look like toy figures. Or I know, trying to think of who the inker was. John Dell maybe over Howard Porter when Morrison's JLA was going on. And a lot of, Howard Porter's style is very, the characters are they, for lack of a better way to describe it, they look like action figures almost, on the comic book page. And then you get that thick inking on it, and it kind of also accentuates this feeling I always get in my mind when I look at that early Howard Porter JLA work. And I kind of get that sense here where it's like, there's not a lot of subtlety in the inking, foreground, background stuff, shading, brush stroke work. It's not really there. Everybody's kind of got the same amount of black inks all over them. Mm-hmm. I mean, they almost blend into the rock structure behind them. So, but I will say in terms of like the covers that we have been seeing, yeah, I mean, it depicts the interior. I'm still obviously going to give the nod to the Baxter cover for this. So, but I liked what you said about marketing, because I have some thoughts about that when it comes to the story itself. And I think both covers have that element to it in ways that I don't think other covers have had, unless we talk about that "We Want You" in the Legion from issue 17, right? Or whatever that was, where it was like, okay, clearly they're targeting the readers. So I think some of that is going on here, as you mentioned. So general thoughts. This has been a long time coming, because, you've said some things about expectations that you want, and the last issue, the cover had some little, bait and switch to it that readers at the time also reacted to. But
right.
I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about this issue? And what are your thoughts about the revelation of the identity of Censor Girl?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mentioned in reference to the cover, I used the word tease, and in my notes for my initial thoughts for this issue, I used that same word, because I love the teases and the reveals throughout this issue. So just from a storytelling standpoint, this was a fun issue to read, because we get those things coming paced throughout the 20 or however many pages that we get, 20 or so pages, and it's just like a nonstop, not really action, but not action in like a physical sense, but just the action of the story going through. We get a lot of that going on through here. And so I really like that. I am, while I like the reveal, I'm also frustrated by it, because we don't get what it is that I really want, which is the why. Why is Projector Censor Girl? Why did she do this? Why was she? Why did she not reveal her identity to some of her closest companions? What is the purpose of this? And what is the connection between her and Emerald Empress besides that which we've already talked about? Because it's there's something that happens in this issue where I'm like, what, is there really more to this, or am I just reading into it, kind of thing? But like I said, it's just the issue as a whole. And the way it was structured, it was just I thought a really great way to keep us coming back, keep us turning the pages to get to the end, and not just because we know that Censor Girl's identity is going to be revealed, but just in terms of what's going on in the story with all these characters. But then also to get us to come back for the next issue, or the next several issues, to finally put a cap on what this mystery really is about, because it's not just about the identity; it's about the why.
Well, I think I would argue that it's more about the identity in terms of like reader conversations, right? Mm-hmm. Don't you think, like in the letter columns that we've been reading, everybody's trying to guess who it is, but we haven't. Did we get a lot of letters saying why it is? Why?
Sure.
Why they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but that to me, that's just the surface part of it.
Sure.
I'm always more interested in the motivations of a character as opposed to the the identity of the character, I guess.
Right. Right. No, that totally makes sense. And I feel like the um the big cliffhanger, I wonder if they would have given us the reveal midway through and then also gave us some explanation of why, or reactions from the Legionnaires. Like, I feel like um, they, I like that they ended it with the reveal, because that's been the big
Mm-hmm.
thing. Who is she? Who is she? Who is she? Who is she? Brainiac, the Legionnaires. Readers been saying. I can remember at the time, you know, a little bit of thinking, I don't know who it is. Who is it? And then when they did reveal it, I was like, oh, I don't think I've read much of Projectra at the time. um, so I like that they ended it in the clip with the cliffhanger, because it's the thing. I think that's the thing that DC has been selling. The title certainly could sell why she's doing what she's doing, but the trade talk always was, well, who is it? Who
Sure.
is it? Especially because everybody wanted it to be Supergirl. You know, and I feel like part of that is that marketing aspect that we've been talking about. The cover has filtered into the story, because this story read oddly exposition-y,
Mm-hmm.
almost like a Stan Lee, part Stan Lee, part Chris Claremont. Um, it When I was reading it, I was thinking, boy, they're really going out of their way to explain, or at least mention, character names, powers, the situation. Um, and then it wasn't until about midway through the issue where I got a real good sense of what you were talking about, where things just were starting to ramp up, right? They were just starting to, oh, here we go. We're getting closer and closer to the Fatal Five. Oh, um, here comes Sensor Girl, and then it switches to another scene, and then we cut to Element Lad and Saturn Girl, where we get the reveal that she's been a Legionnaire before, which is something we knew from a Meanwhile column. But if you weren't reading it, you didn't know that. Then we go back to the fight. Oh, nope, the true traitor is Mentala. Like that, midway through, it almost felt like I wanted to see it in a live action or cartoon, or you could just you could kind of hear the music building, and the
Yeah.
cuts and all that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It
I
was
like
very
that.
cinematic.
Yeah, yeah. I was a big fan of like rereading this, and I read this issue about 3 times before we recorded. I, the first bunch of pages, I wondered if they were constructed with the notion that they knew people were going to pick this up that probably maybe never read a Legion issue before it, because they knew that this was the revelation, the reveal at least, of the identity. Or maybe they came from last issue or something like that. So, you get the introduction of this new Fatal Five, and number one, they are all saying their name, or somebody else is saying their name, and they're all describing their powers. And I get it, they're doing it in front of a mystery character, but it all felt very Stan Lee, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm the you know uh, snow thrower because I throw snow. you know, I don't know, just something about it kind of. And then there was some stuff with like Brainiac 5 and some of the other Legionnaires, once again saying, oh, I think she's a fake. Oh, I think she's this. Oh, I think she's Supergirl's clone. Like, Levitz is just hitting all the beats that we've already seen over and
Yeah.
over again. But because they probably thought, well, it's issue 25, which is also technically an anniversary issue. Maybe somebody new would come to this book. So we want to make sure it's open to everybody. So
Yeah.
it's a strength, obviously, but I also thought of it as a little bit. As I was reading, I was kind of like, oh, that's I don't need all that. But then, I get it. I get it.
Do you think that the stuff that you're describing is uh, overpowering or clunky or.
I found it clunky, but also dry.
Mm,
I found it almost static, like they're almost robotic in the way they were talking, like not
yeah.
that usual deep Paul Levitz. Not that he gets super deep, but like we've been enjoying Levitz's dialogue, his story. Like he can convey emotion, he can convey how these characters talk to each other, so it feels like they're friends. And there was just stuff like, here's this person talking because they need to get this information out. Here's this
Mm-hmm.
person talking so they can get this information out, right? So, whereas I feel the second half of the book, when we got things like the Persuader and Colossus Boy going at it yet again, the motivation or some of the conversation between Saturn Girl and Element Lad is pretty decent, between Emerald Empress and Sensor Girl. It's fast, but you get this. It should be right. It's high tension at the end. There's a lot of emotion. Yeah, so I'm sure as we go through it, some of it'll stick out. It didn't make me hate the issue by no means, but it did. I sort of dropped it down maybe a notch or two because of that. But I also feel bad for faulting them because I understand their position in a business sense, if that's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
So I also unfortunately thought the artwork took a step back.
Really?
Yeah. I forget what issue it was that I really liked. There were a couple splash pages of like Emerald Empress, and it might have even been last issue.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few things in here that I don't know if it was because there's so much script, there's so many different scenes, that maybe LaRoque. It's almost like you don't ever get to live in a sequence long enough to really get your pencil around figures and backgrounds, because here they are on Earth, here they are on Emerald Empress's planet, here they are on Shanghala, here they are, you know what I mean? Like he kept having to bounce, and it's like, I got to do another background. um, and I feel like the two reveals, not the last one, not the cliffhanger, two other ones, the reveal of Mentala,
Mm-hmm.
and the reveal of Sensor Girl, in where Emerald Empress is like, here comes the final player or whatever, and it's like, and it's just like the Ed Hannigan cover for 350 Tales 350, where Sensor Girl's like way in the back. She's just a small little flying towards Colossal Boy, and maybe that's purposeful, maybe, so that it is a page. Well, there is a page turn after it, but maybe it's not so big because, well, she's not joining the Fatal Five, right? Like it almost feels like the story is setting it up to be. So I don't know. There's just a couple things in there, art wise, that I was like, ooh, okay, I don't like that.
Well, I would agree with you that there were some spots that I also had a similar reaction to. But it's funny because I actually quite enjoyed the art overall in this issue. And I thought that because in the Legion Companion book, uh, in the LaRoque interview, he talks about how. Here, I have to find my notes here on this. LaRoque commented that Paul Levitz was starting to give him looser scripts to play with, and that made me think, well, is this the point that Paul Levitz was kind of letting go of the reins a little bit and letting LaRoque play around on the page, because we get a lot of panel breaking images to where, things that happen in one panel are actually overlapping into the other panels. we got. I thought we got a lot of different close up versus what's the opposite of close up, Peter?
Like faraway shots.
The faraway shots. I know. I felt like he was kind of playing around with the structure of what's on the page and how he's presenting it, but within the constraints that you mentioned as well. There are a lot of panels in here where we don't get any backgrounds, or the characters don't look quite right for whatever reason. And so, yeah, I mean, it was kind of messy, but I also thought that for me at least, there was kind of a step forward in the art, and it's been progressing that way for the last few issues, from my perspective.
Right.
Where I'm getting, or maybe I'm just getting more comfortable with LaRocque and his interpretation of these characters.
Right. I think that's because, like I said, I did like last issue, and I think you're right. Like, I thought we reached a point, might have even been last episode, where it was starting to get unfair that we were comparing LaRocque to Lido, because Lido has been gone now, for
right.
almost 10 issues or whatever it's been. And this is LaRocque's book now. And it has been. So, I think you're right. There is if there's any sort of criticism on my part, it's just because I want LaRocque to, when you see those flashes of really great art, I love the duality of opening up on Emerald Empress in a splash page and then closing with Projectra in a full page splash page.
Right. Yeah.
And both figures are great. He's obviously, you can tell he's steering it to a male demographic, but they're great shots, And actually, I like the page before the reveal of Projectra. I like that page a lot. So, I think if there's any sort of like you said, if a character's face looks wonky, it's like, come on. It's, the consistency is really what I want more than anything.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about this, I wanted to mention this. On page 3, we get that beautiful, almost splash pagey shot of Dawnstar flying in space as they're heading off to look for Sensor Girl, and I just thought that was a beautiful picture of her. And of course, in the Legion Companion I read, she was one of LaRocque's favorites. So I totally get why he's doing this or showing us Dawnstar in this way. It is a little sexualized, but or maybe a lot, but it's a beautiful drawing of this character. And I think there's another Dawnstar focused panel in the issue as well. Just to underline the thought, the thought that he really likes this character. So, like I said, you get these wonderful bits like this, and then the issue is balanced by some perhaps less sophisticated work.
Let me ask you this: you're a big Fatal 5 fan. What do you think of the new Fatal 5 as of this issue?
It's interesting. There's some interesting parallels here, because when the Fatal 5 was first introduced, and we talked about this in a previous episode, they were just there. They were presented as villains that have been around within the universe, but we'd never seen them. And so they were just presented, and here they are. They've come together, and really it's the Legion's fault that the Fatal 5 exists in the first place. But we'll set that aside. And here it's not really the same thing, except for them coming together, I guess, as a team, as it were. And I have to say, I'm not as impressed with this lineup, and I think it has more to do with not the characters themselves, because really they're just ciphers at this point. At least 2, maybe 3 of them, right? So you can't count Emerald Empress and Persuader, because they're the existing members, and they've been around for decades at this point. But the 3 new members, we've seen Flare once before in a previous issue, and here she is again. and then we get new member Caress, right? And this is what I thought, like you were mentioning, the kind of clunkiness of some of the stuff in the issue, and this is one of those things where, she's she's just introduced. Hey, you're Caress. If I'm the fourth, I care not who is fifth, Flare. And then a little bit later, as she's introducing herself to the fifth member, save your posturing for enemies, mistress. You're promised great wealth and power, and my acid touch is ready to seize both. So it like you said, it's just it's very expositional. It's, hey, I'm Caress and I have acid powers. I guess what I object to those two characters in particular is all they care about is, well, Caress says wealth and power, and Flare just seems to be going along with it. I can't remember from the last two. She was stealing something. Not something. She was stealing a ship.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, Empress was impressed by her and invited her to join the team. But all she is shown, all she is shown as doing here is just going along with whatever Empress is saying. Which I don't necessarily want to get into this, but that seems counter to the character that I've seen in that previous issue. She doesn't seem like that kind of a person that would just go along with Empress. But that's neither here nor there, because we haven't been given enough of these characters. And yes, I think I'm being unfair here because these are the introductions of these characters, more or less. I don't know. They in the battle with the Legionnaires, they function. I guess I was gonna say they function well enough as a team, but they really aren't. Actually, I don't know if we want to jump into that, but they're very much individuals in a group setting reacting to the event. So I'll just leave it at that, and we can get into the details later if you want.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like it especially because Mentala just joins. Well, I mean, that's who they're talking to in those first pages, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're talking,
Mm-hmm.
although you're supposed to think that it's Censor Girl. And then Mentala pops up, and obviously, it's not like they probably did a lot of training.
Right.
But even Emerald Empress's motivations, as we saw in last issue, where she says, I need people to rule, right? When she was talking to Persuader, she's like, I need slaves, I need
Mm-hmm.
people. I think it's one of the weaker plot points or weaker story structure elements of this issue, where the Fatal Five is there to motivate the Censor Girl mystery,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not much motivation behind the Fatal Five.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's my greatest objection to this, because the Fatal Five should be one of the more potent adversaries in the Legion lineup.
Yeah.
And here they're really not. I question the Emerald Empress's leadership and tactical abilities. Mostly for the fight scene. Like I said, it's very individual instead of a group effort. But why did she choose these particular people? Is it for their powers? Is it because they're just willing to go along with whatever she wants, as opposed to getting, the right people, the right mix of people in her group, even though they may challenge her some? I'm putting a lot of motivation and explanation onto this character that we've not seen. It's not been shown to us, so it's I'm maybe my complaints are maybe overwrought at the very least.
Well, I think it speaks to some of the things I've been thinking about with the Censor Girl stuff in this issue. Like on page 4, when Brainy and them are talking about, following the trail of Censor Girl, everybody's worried she's going to be joining the Fatal Five. And we've seen scenes like with Shrinking Violet and Lightning Lass trying to investigate this formation of the new five. We saw a confrontation between Emerald Empress and Censor Girl back in issue 21, I think, or 21 or 22, where Emerald Empress gave her, gave anybody just an open invitation, like, come be a part of my team. So this formation of a new Fatal Five has been developing next to this mystery of Censor Girl, because the big fear was, oh no, she's going to join the Fatal Five.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was spoken more than it was shown that.
Yes.
Yeah, like even in that page 4, I wrote here, everybody's just assuming that she's going to join the Fatal Five, but why? It's not like she was evil towards the Legion. She just had a secret, and she was just mysterious, but she wasn't mysterious in a bad way. She was helping them out in their missions. She was obviously very knowledgeable about science. So she was causing some tension, and that led to Element Lad saying, okay, can you please just tell me everything's okay? And she's like, well, thank you. I actually think very highly of you now, but I'm going to go. But she didn't say, like, she wasn't like Nemesis Kid or somebody like, you didn't make me a Legionnaire, so I'm going to kick your ankles, like, none of that happened.
Right.
But yet they're all like, oh no, just because we've been told by Levitz that this Fatal Five is forming, they're trying to make the connection. I don't know. That's the stuff that kind of, I feel, got lost in that first half, where they're saying she's going to join the Five. But there's nowhere on the page did we ever get the sense that Censor Girl was bad.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's.
I feel the same way you do with some of the characters. I think we're too far along into Legion history and Legion comics by this point to get a character like Caress, who was only about acid, and kind of go, really? Like, we already have, unless they're trying to do a mono thing, but it's like we already had mono.
Yeah, I was going to point that out too. It's exactly it. Yeah, it's like a replacement.
Yeah. So Flair's kind of cool because I like her design, like, okay, I get that, she's not far off from like a solar Sun Boy or something, but
Mm-hmm.
but that's not strange, So yeah, I don't know who actually came up with these characters, if it was LaRoque, if it was Levitz and LaRoque, you think of like, no, I'm doing it again. I'm sorry. I said earlier I didn't want to do this, but when Lytle was creating Tellus and Quizlet and had some real thought behind Mentala and the redesign of some of those costumes, those are pretty cool characters and pretty cool concepts. If this is LaRoque going, all right, I'm going to do an acid girl. I don't know. It doesn't land quite as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like Empress is dredging the bottom of the barrel when it comes to recruits.
Hey, and maybe that's her fault.
Yeah.
Maybe she's not a good leader,
Exactly. Oh, I totally agree with that. She is the horrible team leader, which only means that I expect that this group will not last, unlike the predecessor group, where, like I said, that team had been around for decades, and menacing the Legion and the Legion worlds, for years. And yet I don't see any longevity. To get back to your original question, what do I think about this Fatal Five? I don't see any longevity with this team, this makeup. So I fully anticipate down the road that we'll get a return of Thurok and Mano and Validus at some stage, and the old Fatal Five will be back with a vengeance on some cover down the road.
And to be fair, we did see Mano in this issue, and he
True.
He was easily handled.
Yeah. Nice pun.
I didn't even mean that. But there, in that, when the team is on Shanghala and Mano just happens to be there, there's another art thing, though, because LaRoque draws him with 2 discs, one on each hand.
I wondered about that, too.
And he's supposed to only have one.
Mm-hmm.
And the dialogue is like reflecting the fact that he only has one, but he's being drawn as 2. So I, that's a little bit of a, it's not a huge mistake, but I can't just say it's a small mistake either. Whether
Yeah.
it's LaRoque not, I mean, he could just grab the who's who, right? Like, we're past that issue anyway. Or Berger should be like, oh,
Yeah.
no, he's only got one. So just tell the colorist, color over that second one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was bad.
somebody missed something there for sure.
Yeah.
But I will say, since we were talking about mono, and the art, I like, besides that screw up there, the way that his face, his head is drawn within his bubble, looks a lot more, I don't know, menacing, alien than I think we've seen him in the past. I'd have to go back and look at previous appearances, but my recollection is that we've not seen such an expressive mono before, in terms of his face. So we only see like just a few panels of it, but I just really dug it. Thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, very ghoulish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually like that sequence too, art wise. Other than the mistake, I like some of the action between Brainy and Mono.
Yeah, that's a good page.
Yeah. We're just kind of bouncing around. So, I mean, where do you want to go to next? We can go big, we can go small, whatever you want.
Well, so I think we should cover everything else about the issue and then delve into the Sensor Girl stuff at the end. Let's see here. Usually my notes are more or less chronological in the issue, so that as the Legionnaires leave Earth, like I said, I mentioned that on page 3, that wonderful Dawnstar near splash page, but we get that conversation between the Legionnaires, and this is where you mentioned well, here's all the expositional stuff that we've already read before, but just in case you've forgotten or you're new, here's all these things that we've heard from these characters before, such as Timberwolf. But I did find in that scene that Brainiac 5's comment about Sensor Girl being, very curious. He says she is dangerous to us and to herself, and so that kind of goes to what you were discussing or mentioning before about the team and the motivations they have for accusing her or just assuming that she's going to join the Fatal Five. But I thought that was his choice of words was interesting. Her being dangerous to them, that makes sense if they believe that she's off to join the Fatal Five. But why is it she dangerous to herself? And if you tie that into his belief that she is Supergirl, what does that mean? It's something that just stuck out to me, and I don't, for what is shown here, I don't understand why he would say that. What's his motivation for this?
And one of his team members calls him out on it too. She's right. Whoever says, we don't even know who she is, so how can you say that? Mm-hmm. So I did like that at least one of the other members called him out on it, but then they didn't really follow up on that conversation.
Yeah. Exactly. That's been a lot of my frustration for these kinds of things, is that Levitz kind of throws them out there, and then we don't get the next scene with the characters discussing these things, But it doesn't really matter, because nothing really changes between that page and then later when other characters or even these same characters are discussing the situation. It's just things, in a very soap opera way, things are moving forward, but also remaining very static. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
No, it does. You almost wonder if this should have been, it's already oversized because they're doing more pages anyway, with this new format, right? But you almost feel like it should have been maybe it should have been 38 pages or something.
Oh yeah.
Just to kind of flesh it. Yeah, just to flesh it out a little more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if we let's stick with that, because there's 3 different groupings of Legionnaires in this issue, right? So, and this is the one that's following Sensor Girl's trail, led by Brainiac 5, Deputy Leader, but also the one that we've been following closely anyway in some previous issues. And you sort of just hit on, you already hit on where his motivations are. He just wants this information. It's one of the lines. It's one of the little notes that I have for myself from a statement you said in one of our previous episodes. What the reaction of Brainiac 5? What is that going to be like? Now, we clearly didn't get that this issue, but for some reason, when he learns that Ultra Boy was able to see into her costume and nothing was there, is that the scene where he gets or is it the next one?
Yeah. No, it's that one. Yeah, he says empty, but that's not possible, and he's very confused.
Right, and then when they go to Shanghala, and they Dawnstar finds out that that's where the trail led, but then it simply vanishes, and then he says, "Of course, what a fool I've been." So you almost get the notion that he knows.
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, all right, well, why? Why does he get the notion, if he does know that it's Projectra, outside of, I don't know, it was just an illusion they were following? It was a fake trail? I don't think it was, because it makes sense that if they were following Sensor Girl to Shanghala, she's visiting Karate Kid, right? Because that's one of the panels that we got in that Mon-El issue, in issue 23, where she's in the Hall of Dead Heroes looking at Karate Kid. So I'm curious this is something I guess we're going to have to wait until next issue to see if it actually plays out. But is that all it is? Unless is that all it is? It's just that she was a phantom, an illusion, and that's what they were following. So he's like, oh, right, there's only one Legionnaire he wouldn't even know it was a Legionnaire.
Exactly. That's the problem I have with that supposition, is because he lives in a universe where there are at least 25 individuals who have these special abilities, but it's filled with the United Planets that has worlds of people that have special abilities. So, yeah, given the clues that we have been presented, it seems it's well, I guess in my notes I had it's very Holmesian, the way that Brainiac 5 goes from surprise at this detail, this clue, to just a little bit later there's another event, and that leads him to automatically know know the identity of Sensor Girl. I think the author is playing a little fast and loose with the clues at this point, and Brainiac 5 is kind of the, like I said, the Holmesian character here. And this is just a personal thing. I always hated that bit where the detective just pulls the answer out of the ether, and then we get the reveal of, well, based on this and this and this, this makes sense. But as of now, it doesn't make sense, and so I automatically react negatively to things like that.
The only thing I could maybe think is, okay, he does have superior intelligence.
Sure.
And he, like a mentat, he's putting it all together. The idea, the notion that she has a globe of a destroyed planet, or a planet that's no longer there. She affects the senses. I'm throwing this out, and I hope that this isn't residual memory, but I'm also wondering if this notion of this character being able to travel so far and then just disappearing, did she steal the technology that Zamir created to teleport Orando in the first 5 issues? Because she did make her planet disappear again. Right? She told the Legion, go away. I'm taking my planet to another. or it was assumed that the planet, it didn't go back to our space. It kind of just went away, right? I think.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's what I recall as well.
did she incorporate that technology into her being? I don't know. I can't remember. I don't remember the next couple issues. I'm just sort of trying to think like Brainiac 5. Like if something just disappears, they do have technology that can do that, and they have people that can do that. But what's been the most recent example of that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. I guess it's Orlando. I guess. I don't know. So, yeah, I was a little frustrated by that. It felt that those scenes felt a little cat and mousey. Um, you got a mention, like you said, between Dawnstar and Wildfire, just to make sure that everybody knows that there's tension between those characters. I did like the little bit where Brainiac stops at Invisible Kid's tomb. I have to assume, because here, this is part of that knowledge that is missing in my brain. Were they really good friends because they were scientists? Or am I thinking of their relationship post Zero Hour, where Lyle Norg was a really strong member of the Legion team, and he was played as a scientist, and Brainy and Lyle had some kind of relationship. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if you had any thoughts to that.
I don't know specifically, but I kind of think that this is a retroactive situation where Levitz is extrapolating this friendship based on their scientific pursuits.
Right.
So, I mean, I love that little detail, even if it hasn't been earned throughout the Legion stories through the years. But it sounds like they picked up on that in later incarnations of the Legion. So that would be nice to read once I get to those two.
And then there's a small little sequence with yet another team where they're creating this giant emerald.
Oh boy!
In hopes of in hopes of using it to find Emerald Empress.
To find or lure her.
Oh, either way, it wasn't my favorite sequence in the book.
Yeah, I didn't get that at all. It was just like, what is she? Do they think the Emerald Empress is like the equivalent of a moth to a flame, and this emerald is that? I just like, what is this?
I guess because they were trying to recreate the energies. That's why I was like thinking they're just trying to give the science police something that could act like a homing device or something.
Oh, okay. Maybe, 'cause, I mean, they do load it up onto the ship. I don't know. There's something missing here, and boy, if they don't give us something this next issue, I'm gonna be really irritated about this scene.
Yeah, I don't know if they do. I thought it was just Levitz's way of going, White Witch needs to do something. She hasn't done
exactly.
something in a while.
Yeah. And block, or his favorite, Lightning Lash. She's got to do something in the issue. So here she is energizing this thing.
Right.
I even did think though, Peter, that, maybe this is a lure by why would they make a giant emerald as opposed to this? But, maybe it's supposed to suggest another Emerald Eye of Ekron that would lure her to them because of the energies. I don't know. It's just really clunky and pointless, really.
And it's the only time we see that grouping too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think some of the artwork here too is where I was reacting to some of the artwork, like Block lifting that emerald is not strong, and he just putting it onto like two little hooks on the front of a ship. Like I felt like it's the 30th century. That should be a little bit more interesting in its connection. Now here's the other odd thing, since that's really the only scene we get with them, and we've covered Brainiac's team, Brainiac 5's team. In the Tales reprint, they take out the second Shanghala scene. because the Tales reprint can only have so many pages, right? So they cut the second time we go back to Shanghala, where Dawnstar once again tries to find, or where Dawnstar reveals that the trail has ended. So we don't even get Brainiac 5 saying, of course, we get the mono thing and the fight and all that, but then that's the last time we get, oddly enough, they cut the next sequence, right? So my brain was then going, why? They should have cut this whole Emerald thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. Like that part of it doesn't really mean anything to the larger story. So I thought that was weird.
Mm-hmm.
We got to cut 2 pages. I mean, that Brainy thing it's not like it's monumental, but he is a driving force behind this mystery. He's the one being most affected by it, in many ways. So very strange. As I was comparing the two, because I actually have that issue. I have issue 350. I was like, going through the pages, and I was like, oh, I skipped something. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't. They cut that sequence. Weird.
Well, a page they didn't cut, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I totally forgot to mention this in the synopsis. It was a blink and you miss it page, maybe, but we get the scene here at the meta complex, where Ron Vidar is supposedly recuperating, and one of the doctors, it's revealed to us that he's under the sway of Universo. So I just want to make sure, just in the interest of completion, I wanted to mention that little bit that's just tossed in here to remind us, hey, there's this other plot that's going on.
Yeah, and if I put on my editor hat, it's kind of weird because we saw Ron Vidar in the Legionnaires 3 miniseries. He was wide awake. Because remember, they went to him to go get a time cube.
Right. Right, and then we get that scene with Saturn Girl, and Element Lad mentions their little adventure.
Yeah, but if he's in a coma here, see what I'm saying? He's the timeline. Ron's timeline is all wonky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it depends on how much time has passed between Legionnaires 3 and this issue,
or the story where he got hit.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Right.
Yeah.
Which was what, 2 issues ago?
Might have been more. I think it was like 2021 or 22.
Okay.
Because then I also have in my notes that in 22 they were visiting him and he was awake. And now he's back in, unless it's the doctor messing around with,
Oh, I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of confusion going on of like, how severe is this injury that Ron Vidar is supposed to have? Unless it is, I wrote here, Dr. Fashir. Is he messing around with his recovery, which is true, which is obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's another page they could have cut out of the tale,
yep,
more than the other one. So, let's do the third team.
Yeah, the Stratus team.
Yeah, so this is the group that manages to actually deduce a connection between Mentala and Emerald Empress, and just happens to go follow a lead for Mentala, and it leads him to the Fatal Five. I'm a little confused with last issue, the Fatal Five. They were on a different planet, but also kind of had the same thing where it was all like wealthy estates, but it was called something else, like Starshire or something like that. And now we're at Strata. Minor point, but some of the design element looked the same, so I got confused. But anyway.
Yeah.
But we got a couple things here, a couple scenes with Tellus, a thing on Titan. And like I said, this is the group that actually confronts them. Do you have any thoughts about this little section of teammates?
Not that much. I did like how Colossal Boy, who, if I remember correctly, was a science police officer or a candidate
Mm-hmm.
before he joined the Legion, and so I like how he's kind of leading the investigation with this group, and he's pushing to because there's that interesting scene between him and Dream Girl, or this bit between them, where she says, may I remind you, Element Lad reluctantly let you come here, Colossal Boy, and only because we were dropping the Restorer on Titan for treatment anyway. He may not," and then he interrupts her. I'll talk him into clearing another trip. And he's like, "Come on." But I like I said, I liked seeing Colossal Boy be more than just, the big guy that is usually just shown overpowering his opponents, or not, as probably more often not. He's got this training, he's got this history, and more importantly, kind of the interest in being a detective, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because the resident detective, Chameleon Boy, is pretty much out of action when it comes to this whole thing, other than the little discussion he has with Element Lad.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more, like you said before, expositional, and throwing us some tidbits that we've already been privy to. So it's nice to see these other Legionnaires taking on these other maybe minor roles that other characters have usually been afforded in stories. So I really like that bit. And then, like I said, that thing between him and Dream Girl, it's like Dream Girl always has come across to me as, at least in recent issues, as someone who doesn't mind bucking the system and going her own way. And yet she is the voice of, I don't know, the establishment in this scene. It was weird to see that. It seems a little incongruous to what we've been shown about her before. And so here I'm extrapolating. She just thinks this is a waste of time, and she just wants to get back home for some reason. I don't know.
I wrote that in my notes too. Like, where's her impulse? Why is she following rules and regulations at this point? The only thing I could sort of think is it wasn't her idea.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is a very good extrapolation there.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
I want to follow up on the Colossal Boy thing because, you're right. Like I like that. You saying this whole detective thing is starting to make sense, especially if the Legion lore of him and Cam being good friends, maybe some of that would rub off on him. This mm-hmm. notion, along with the science police thing. So I think those are great observations that you had. I always like when you get to see Colossal Boy use his powers in such an offensive way, where he's just you should be afraid of Colossal Boy, right?
Oh yeah.
The way he goes after Persuader in that battle reminds me of the issue where they find out that Shrinking Violet had been kidnapped and replaced. And there's a sequence where they go after her, where she's in like a med tank or something like that. And Colossal Boy is he's like ripping through the floor and punching walls. And I think one of the Legionnaires is like, somebody better calm him down because he's mad.
Mm-hmm.
And you almost get the sense that he probably is growing bigger than he ever has before. And then, of course, there's the battle that he had with Duplicate Boy over Shrinking Violet, who wasn't really Shrinking Violet at the time. That was from some earlier issues. Like, when he comes a-knocking and starts growing and is going to step on you and punch you and swipe that big... Like, yeah, that should be scary. That should be scary. So he gets a little bit of a spotlight here, which is nice. Or at least he gets some action.
Yeah.
Whereas you get someone like Starboy, who's barely done anything in this entire volume, and is just part of that one sequence that doesn't make sense anyway, But it's nice to see at least Levitt's focusing on someone else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Maybe that's what I'm reacting to in part because I feel like we've been getting, the spotlight on a lot of the same characters throughout the various stories or plot lines that have been going on.
Mm-hmm.
And Colossal Boy is this nice, refreshing little change in this.
The other thing I liked about the sequence on Titan is in that narration box where they talk about, well, first of all, whoever thought we would get another mention of the Restorer? I mean, wow, I'm surprised. Color me surprised about that. So in the narration, they say, you get the notion that when mentalists, when people from Titan go off-world, they have to stay in constant sort of communication, which is what the Legion team is trying to go after, these discs that have some kind of connection to Mentala or to all Titans, but that they have to pay back some of what they earn to whatever institute that is that they learn from. I just thought that was an interesting little, Paul Levitson kind of exploration into a planet, into a society that makes them different from ours, or some kind of like mirror to what maybe Levitz thinks our society should do, or I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting. And then you get that quote underneath it, think twice because you never know who's listening the first time or whatever.
Yeah.
Like those are great. I really like those caption boxes.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the things I've always loved about, I think I've mentioned this before about like the Encyclopedia Galactica entries that we get or other things like this that we're seeing. It's a nice little, just a little tidbit that better defines or introduces ideas where it just makes this universe feel a lot more lived in or encompassing or just different. And yeah, I totally agree. It's great little bits of information that we get there, and is much better in terms of expositional knowledge than some of the dialogue that we're getting in this issue.
Yeah. Plus the other thing too, I think it helps to fight the notion that, Saturn Girl is a blonde white woman, right? Oh, but really she's also from Titan. And they do have some alien, quote unquote, alien aspects to them. Things that maybe we don't understand. Like, what is it like to live with telepathy? A whole society who has telepathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get elements of that when it comes to, say, Polar Boy even kind of talks about it later too, where he's like, oh, hey, tell us if you like that, you should come out to the, what do they call them, the outer worlds or whatever, the colony worlds. That's right. It's like, yeah, he mentions the colony worlds, and that's something that they would play around with, like in around 0 Hour or before with the Valor series, where all of those people, any planet that everybody shares a power is probably a colony world from Earth, because their metagene kicked in, or I don't know, whatever. I forget what the whole story is behind the Valor series, but
yeah,
that he seeded all these planets. So I like that. It kind of makes them alien, quote unquote alien, when really they just look like they could all be from Earth anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good. So those little dialogue things, like you mentioned, that's the Levitt stuff that I like, and that was missing a lot from some of those early pages. But it's good that we just got a few things, especially with Polar Boy. Like when he goes racing into the battle, he's one of those characters that we haven't seen much of either, outside of his introduction as a member. But what was nice was, even though they're like, hey, don't do that, it's the Fatal Five, he's like, oh, no, I'm cool. I'm just going to engage. I know you're coming. Believe me, I'm not doing this by myself. which is great because he's a veteran, right? Like, even though he's new to the team, he is a veteran. He's a superhero. So I liked that
Yeah.
little bit of personality.
And well, speaking of Polar Boy, there's on that scene on Titan, um, this is just a little throwaway thing, but the person that's there assisting them, it seems like there's some interplay between those two characters. So maybe Polar Boy is going to get a girlfriend. I don't know. It's just I like little things like that, even though they're, like I said, they're just throwaway. Maybe just to show that Polar Boy's there. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the point of this is, except for maybe something will come out of this.
Yeah. If I stick with this team for a little bit outside of the Sensor Girl stuff, I did like the LaRoque pages of art, page 18 and 19, when the ship was being... Or, no, I'm sorry. Not that. It's pages... Wherever the ship gets destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
I thought those were some fairly well-designed pages with all the debris and rushing into the fight scene. There was some good energy behind it as we've been talking about it. And
some good facial expressions going on here, too. There's, right before the ship is basically destroyed, there's a really cool shot of Ultra Boy, yelling to everybody to get out. But I thought that was really well done. And there's another on the next page with Dream Girl, her reaction, just very well done. But then we get, like the next page with the fight, and it's just little bodies in here, and not really anything to crow about, I guess, in terms of the art. But yeah, good stuff in some of these sequences.
Do you want to talk about Element Lad, his two scenes, or
yes,
especially the scene with Saturn Girl? What do you have for that sequence? Those sequences.
Saturn Girl. I gotta find that page. Hold on.
That's all right. I mean, the first sequence we kind of talked about. It's really just him and Chameleon.
Oh, with Cam. Yeah.
And they're just kind of kicking around everything that we've been talking about.
There was something about that scene, if you don't mind jumping back to that.
Sure.
So, like I said, Chameleon Boy has been kind of the Legion detective for a while now, and he's, from my perspective, been sidelined, like I said. But then he says these things here. He says, "It's a pity Sensor Girl turned out to be such a distraction, or to be a distraction at such a critical moment. I hope she hasn't joined the Empress." Okay, fine. That goes back to the expositional stuff. This is what I thought was curious. And I thought she was a Supergirl clone Brainy had created. And I'm like, what? Where did this come from?
Well, they did have that argument.
Sure.
Didn't he even say something about, like, well, you've been known to do rash things or something? Like,
yeah, but I mean, the idea of Brainiac 5 cloning a fellow member, I don't know. That has such potential and weight to it but it's just this throwaway line. It's like Chameleon Boy just like, here's this thing, this stray thought I thought of. I'm just going to say it. But then, then they drop it. It's just, I don't know. It had, there's potentially so much to that they could have done in the previous issues to even suggest that Brainiac 5 was behind Sensor Girl in some way. And I don't know. Or maybe it's as messy as it sounds as I'm saying it, that they didn't want to go down that route. But I don't know. It's like, wow, that's a really interesting plot point that just kind of appears out of nowhere. Maybe. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of weird.
Cam doesn't think much of Brady.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, exactly. It's it's things like that. It's like, wow, we're really getting at least the suggestion of some group dynamics in here that I wish they would really play up more. This being, like I said, soap opera-esque, that makes perfect sense for them to do things like that. But I guess these comics are more or less plot driven more than anything else. So I can see why they wouldn't delve too much or spend too much page real estate on those kinds of things.
So I just went back to issue 24, and he does bring that up in front of Brainy's face.
The cloning thing?
Yeah, he says, I was afraid
wow.
you had created a Supergirl clone.
Oh,
then
whoops.
again, you've been known to do such things unconsciously when you were approaching a breakdown.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that part. I totally forgot about the clone thing. Whoops. I'm gonna blame the. I mentioned the accident earlier at the top of the. I got a concussion, and that kind of plays around with your memory. So I won't let it be the fact that I am getting older and my memory is not what it used to be. So
no, I think it's still a fair point though, because it shows you just how divisive everybody has become, or just on edge because of Censor Girl. And
that's true.
What is the one thing you do with your friends when everybody's annoyed at each other? You go right to the thing that annoys you about them.
Mm-hmm.
With Brainy, it just happens to be that he likes to create things that kill Legionnaires.
Yeah.
So I don't blame.
That's fair.
I don't
That's
blame
fair.
Cam. Although Element Lad does say, what does he say? Something like, "Oh, well, he's been known to go crazy, but he won't do that anymore." It's like, well, I don't know about that.
That's being a little too fair to Brainiac, I think.
Yeah. But anyway.
All right. So Garth Residence.
Yeah, let's talk about that sequence.
So, well, the first thing I put in my notes was, there's a Legionnaires 3 reference. So you get, even though maybe the timeline might be a little wonky, like you suggested earlier, I like that little bit of, hey, we're tying this to this other series. Even though it's oblique, it's not like they put in an editor's note, hey, go read Legionnaires 3. But I like that. We already touched on the clue drop that Imra gives us about she was already a Legionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, the other thing about this scene I thought was really interesting, but has nothing to do really with the plot of this issue, is how much. Well, I guess the interesting relationship between Imra and Garth, because Garth is very much he's the dad, not the dad. Obviously, he's a dad. What's the word I'm looking for here?
Parent.
He seems to be. Yeah, the parent. Yeah, he seems to be taking care of Graham a lot, or he seems very comfortable in this role, and Element Lad comes to talk to them, but it's Imra that he's focused on, and she. I don't know. I put in my notes that she seems to wear the pants in the family, and maybe, and I realize that's a bit sexist, but anyway. But she is definitely the elder statesman of the two between her and her husband. Mm-hmm. And I really like that dynamic. And granted, she was a longtime Legion leader early on, and she's the one that vouched for Censor Girl when she came to join the Legion.
Right. It's all on her shoulders.
Totally, yeah, it all makes sense in regards to that. I just really liked that she has this role in the Legion now that she has, and that Element Lad is getting her counsel on this thing. So I just like that dynamic.
And you just have to wonder what is going through Element Lad's mind when she makes the revelation that she's been a Legionnaire before.
Mm-hmm.
The list isn't very long, right? Like, if you think about what female member, if we're going to go very binary, we're going to just assume that it is a female, right? Like,
right. Mm-hmm.
Because that certainly has happened before, where it's been a male or female masquerading as a male, or so it could very easily go on the other way.
Right.
What's the list? There is no list. It's Supergirl. It's Duo Damsel.
Mm-hmm.
It's Projectra.
I think that's it.
That's it, right?
Unless you extrapolate maybe some other temporary members of the Legionnaires.
Lana Lang.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
What about there's a scene of like Element Lad rushing to Brainy? I think it's Insect Queen. That'd have been disastrous. And then and then another option would be just to pull a Legionnaire out of the hat, like Kid Quantum later, right? Like just this random. Right. Oh, he's been a Legionnaire, but you didn't know about it,
Yeah, exactly.
That would have been unfair.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, in terms of like anybody who hasn't read the Meanwhile column, that's big news.
Yes.
And also still pumps the theory that it could be Supergirl.
Mm-hmm.
And then
even though we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages away from the big reveal.
Right. But it's pretty cool. I do wonder if that scene would have played better last issue.
Yes. I was just going to say that because Element Lad says, but tell me again, it was okay to make Sensor Girl a Legionnaire. So yeah, I think had this come before, that would have given that reveal a lot more weight.
Yeah, but then
or maybe
he would have had to act on it though, don't you think?
That's true, exactly. Yeah.
The only thing I have left is all about just Sensor Girl. It's not much.
Yeah.
I already mentioned, I think the reveal of Sensor Girl coming into the battle is kind of anticlimactic. And the reveal of Mentala being the 5th Fatal 5 member, which sort of makes sense given everything. She disappeared from the academy. Everybody's thinking Sensor Girl's going to join the Fatal 5. I think there might have been a mention last issue that Mentala could also join the Fatal 5. Or maybe that, that when Wildfire and them went to go visit the Legion Academy. But her entrance into the battle also felt a little anticlimactic. I mean, the buildup of her shrinking Colossal Boy down is cool.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to have seen a shot of her, like a different shot of her, of like,
a little more. I don't mean this, more of a heroic pose type situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially since on page 2, it's built. It's like, oh, who's this? Whose shadow are we seeing here? That and the 4 members of the Fatal 5. Who are they talking to? And then we get that reveal here later in the issue, which is, like you said, it's not it's not the most profound in it, but yeah.
I have some smaller notes, real quick. Empress calling Tellus a monster, which says a lot about her.
Mm-hmm.
There again, we're in a utopia, supposedly, but obviously there's still people, and just Sensor Girl showing that she's not a traitor right away, like I feel bad for her in some ways because some Legionnaires were so quick to write her off because of her quote unquote actions. Not her actions, but what they deemed to be her actions or her personality. And it may be a lacking in the whole Who is Sensor Girl mystery that there might have been other ways that Levitz could have created that strife and created that tension a little bit more on the page, rather than them just sitting around talking behind her back, which, to be fair, is a very teen thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like that she throws herself into the mix right away, calls on the other Legionnaires and says, come on, let's go, let's go to battle. And she's a Legionnaire. She's a Legionnaire through and through. Like it's I really kind of fell for her in these pages.
Yeah, that panel where she, like you said, she rallies the troops, and Polar Boy says, "Already moving, Sense Girl, and thanks." It's almost, I kind of read that as like, well, this is the exhalation of the team being
almost to say, okay, we're with you, we got you, we're sorry, we got you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I was wanting to get at. Yeah, so I thought that was, maybe not as earned as it could be or should be, but it was nice, a nice shorthand that Levitz is employing here to move on, at least in this moment.
Right, because we got issues to go yet. Yeah,
yeah, and it's interesting that it's one of the newer guys that says the words.
Well, it's her buddy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, like part of the new five, right? That speaks a lot to him. He's like trying to look out for one of his own. So now does Projectra have history with the Fatal Five? Do you know?
Well, boy, I'm pretty sure she was part of the original introduction of the Fatal Five. She was part of that story.
Oh, that was okay.
Because I'd have to go back and look now. But my memory is, and we've already discussed how good my memory is, that she was the one who went to get Persuader during the Sun Eater incident.
Okay. So she was there. Because it was her, Karate Kid, Nemesis Kid, and Pharaoh Lad who joined the Legion at the same time, right?
Yeah, I don't remember that, but
I think that's what it is.
I'll take your word for it.
And then later, when Pharaoh Lad dies, shortly thereafter, they're part of that team, obviously. Mm-hmm. I was just wondering if she had history, or if this is just Levitz saying that her and Empress, because her and Empress, man, when they talk, I could read a whole issue about that, because they just they understand each other. Obviously, and this is something I hinted at way back in issue 21 or 2, whenever it was, when they were talking to each other, and I kept saying, "Oh, listen to the dialogue. Like, it's an empress talking to a princess or a queen. There's royalty there. Empress is just sort of like, it's just a name. It's not like she really has a station, but these are characters that are cut from like the same cloth that White Queen is cut from. If the three of them got in, you could do a reality show with White Queen from the X-Men, Emerald Empress, and Projectra, right? And it would be like one of those housewives of whatever. There's a way that they talk to each other. There's a way that they communicate to each other, and I loved that it still was here. To the point that, it wasn't a lot, but, Emperor saying, you're not going to confuse the eye this time around. There's no escape. The game is over. The masquerade done. Bid farewell to life as you welcomed it. And then she, like, how does Empress know? Unless the eye figured it out. But
yeah, that was the very question I was going to ask you. Was it? Well, here, before we get to that, just real quick, to punctuate what you were just saying, that scene, that one panel that you're not all that impressed with, where Sensor Girl enters the fray, but we don't know yet, really if she's with the Fatal Five or not. But Empress says, and now the final act, as she's coming, right? And then it's revealed that, oh no, she's a Legionnaire and all that stuff. But it's very the Emerald Empress's choice of words with that, and then what you just quoted about the game and the masquerade done. It's very theatrical.
Yep.
Very,
yep.
I don't know. Forgive me, maybe perhaps a bit Shakespearean in tone.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that about this character and the relationship, like you were saying, between the two. And I really dig that stuff. And like you said, it's very short or minor in this issue, but it does continue that which we've already seen. And so that's a nice through thread that I really appreciate between these two characters.
I mean, and how ballsy is Emerald Empress to go, oh, here's Sensor Girl. I'm just going to act like I know she's going to join the team. She doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the whole...
Well, her hubris is that, well, of course she's going to join.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Like, that's the stuff I wanted more of. And maybe we'll get it next issue. Again, I don't remember the next issue. But if we're just talking about this issue, that's what made the second half of this book really sing for me. And that second to last page before the reveal, I love the energy, the firepower of the emerald eye, the way it's colored, the red and the green, the design of it. It's oddly got a little bit of a mirrored composition to when Sensor Girl backhanded Emerald Empress 3 issues ago, or whatever that was.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it's got some nice symmetry there, and there's tension. The drama is there, like you said. You could almost hear the music of her going, "This is it, boom, da 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 da, masquerade's over, ba 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 ba." You know, like just everything about it is so cool. Before we get to the last page, one question about Mentala. Did you know she was going to be the 5th member? Was that a surprise for you? Did you remember it from before, or was that new for you?
That's a good question. I don't have any direct recollection that she was the new member, but given that I know that Sensor Girl was not, it was a fairly obvious conclusion.
Okay.
So go ahead.
No, I was I just wondered if that landed, or what that was, or did it mean anything to you? So
it probably landed the same way that her reveal was for you in terms of the actual reveal. It's like, well, oh, there she is. Yeah,
right. Okay.
Okay. So I really want to talk to you about the reveal, right? So it's the dialogue from Emerald Empress seems to suggest she knew who Sensor Girl was. Mm-hmm. She's not surprised. She's in fact, that last page, the way, when she announces Projectra and we see Projectra there, the look on Emerald Empress's face is almost, she's got this little smirk, like she's really pleased with herself. But I don't take that as at all as a reaction of surprise. And so I don't know. Does that add more weight to the relationship, or that connection between the two characters, or is it, I don't know, what does it pay off for you? Does it work?
I think it's interesting. And it's the reason why I asked you if Projectra has any relationship with the Fatal Five, in previous stories, because you could probably just wrap it up that the eye, when they first encountered Sensor Girl and the eye kind of wigged out and hid behind the Empress, that had to make Empress curious. Like, mm-hmm. What kind of powers does she have that this is happening, right? What about Sensor Girl would make the eye do that? So maybe we'll learn next issue that Emerald Empress did a little digging and said, all right, I'm going to find out who this is and why. And that's why she's just like, all right, I know who you are. I know how to attack you now so that your powers don't work. And she gets the glee of revealing her in front of the other members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where I think, really, you talk about her hubris. I know something the Legionnaires don't know,
mm-hmm.
So I think these are all great questions, and we're just going to have to wait till next issue. But I find that this, reading it now after all these years, that's the thing that jumps out the most, is the connection between Empress and Projectra, whether I'm forcing it on there or it is there, or it's just a matter of consequence, right? Like of these two characters who really didn't have history, but suddenly find themselves at at odds, and it's kind of interesting to me. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
yeah, and the reveal is great. Like I love the artwork. You know, if I
Oh yeah.
put my little teenage hat on when I read it, like she looks great.
Yep.
It didn't mean much to me because I hadn't read a lot of Projector stuff, so it probably, if anything, made me go, oh, okay, well, I wonder what this is going to mean. And if you put all the clues together and all who else could it have been at this point if it wasn't going to be Supergirl? Outside of, well, no, it couldn't have been Saturn Queen because she was never a member, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fine. I think it works. You know, I guess we should go through maybe some of those clues and then look at some of the reader reactions from a future issue to see what people thought. Did you have any other thoughts yourself though in terms of the reveal?
No, but I was curious. I don't know if this is the right moment to ask this of you though, because this is so weird to be reading this in hindsight. You know, reading it for the first time, but already knowing the big mystery.
Yeah.
Because what I was trying to do was, if I had been reading this as it was coming out, what would I don't think I would have guessed it would have been Projectra. I think I would have gone along with the idea of Supergirl, more out of a sense of getting around her death in Crisis and wanting that character to continue in some way, especially in with the Legion. So I probably just would have, blindly accepted that possibility and not really entertain anything else. Plus I'm not really good at figuring out clues in narratives such as this. So I tend to just kind of take in all the information and try to form a hypothesis, and I'm not always right. So I tend not to make the effort, I guess is what I'm trying to say, regardless. So, but I was curious, how did you process this mystery?
I think it just really was cool that there just was a mystery, that it was this, who was this person? How is it going to turn out? Look how it's disrupting the lives of the Legion. And having something to talk about, if I did talk about any of it, I can't remember if any of my friends were reading it at the time, or just reading about it in the letter columns, people guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when comics can kind of go beyond that, like think of the Judas Contract, an ongoing mystery. I know Kevin from the CGS crew used to always talk about in the 80s, there was a real mystery of who was Hobgoblin in the Amazing Spider-Man issues at the time, and all these little secrets. And then it turned out to be one person, but it wasn't really them, like it's no different than who shot JR and the mystery of, I'm trying to pick things that happened in the 80s, like what's up with Adam Chandler and All My Children, and why is he mean one day and the next day he's like your best friend, and it turns out there was a twin, like that stuff is what it's why we got attracted to Lost, to be able to talk about these mysteries. And you have people who really want the answer to be something they've already thought of, or they want the end to be more important than the journey, but really it ultimately is about the journey and how Sensor Girl affected all these characters. And again, this could be something we can table for when we read the next two issues, where we're really going to start to get some of the reactions and some of the spill from this.
Yes. Yeah. Besides, why did this happen? How did this happen? It's those relationships, how does the fact that she kept this from her fellow Legionnaires in the way that she did, how does that impact her relationships with them?
Yeah.
What does that mean for the team going forward? Is it going to be a healing moment, or even further rifting of the team?
Right. And the reactions from readers, in the letter column in issue 31 about this issue, it's a letter column of reactions from issue 25 and 26. For some reason, they kind of merge it. So we don't get a lot, but, we get one letter writer who says, thank you for bringing Jackie back to the group. And when you think about Paul Levitt's track record, we talked about Lightning Lass. She had been away from the Legion for like a good year or two before he brought her back in the Baxter run, right? We've already seen what he did with Shrinking Violet. Even though we saw Projectra in the first 5 issues of the Baxter run, she was not a member of the team since she got married to Karate Kid way back in, Legion Annual number 2, I think it is. Mm-hmm. So she's been away from the team too. So as far as Levitz goes, this is what he likes to do. He's redefining this character. He took the opportunity when they decided it couldn't be Supergirl anymore, which really kind of, in a way, is its own way of doing exactly what he did with Shrinking Violet. It's very similar to what John Ostrander would do later with Barbara Gordon, right? Take her demise in The Killing Joke and turn her into Oracle. Well, there's Paul Levitt saying, all right, I'm going to take the demise of Kara, keep her safely in the 30th century, redefine her, make her the Censor Girl character. Oh, we can't do that. All right, well, you know who else it would fit? And I think it sometimes fits even more, is Projectra. She has a very real need, I think, to prove herself again, to put herself back into a place to maybe honor Val, maybe honor her dead husband, to get back at. I don't think it's pure revenge driven, or maybe it started out that way. I guess we'll find out. But I think it really works on a writer level. Like Levitt's, damn man, he took an opportunity in not being able to use Kara, to still make the story make sense. It's not like the switcheroo of like Armageddon 2001, where it was supposed to be Captain Atom, but then they made it Hank Hall, the identity of Monarch. But that kind of felt empty and last minute. This didn't feel that way to me. It really does feel like it developed with them kind of going, oh shit, what do we have to do? But they at least made it work,
So let me interject here with some stuff from the Legion companion book.
Awesome.
So this is an interview with Steve Lytle, and he was asked to tell us about Censor Girl, and he said Censor Girl was mostly Paul's baby. Paul really wanted to keep as much of the older elements of the Legion as possible, and yet with the changes in the Superman universe, we were kept from using Superboy as much as we would have liked. We couldn't use Supergirl because she was going to die in Crisis. It still hadn't happened yet, but we knew it was coming up. It was going to eventually be published, and we knew she was going to die. So Paul thought, Steve, I want you to think of Censor Girl as Supergirl having survived Crisis, but she doesn't remember who she is, and her powers have been almost entirely wiped away with the exception of her sensory abilities. So at the time, I think he was suggesting that she had heat vision, X-ray vision, and super breath maybe. I don't know. She would have these powers that were thought of as Supergirl sensory powers, and that would somehow be Kara, Supergirl surviving and only known in the Legion. She would appear in the future and never return to the 20th century so that we would still mourn her as dead. But a few issues later, or a few weeks, whatever it was, Paul says, we can't do it. It can't be Supergirl. Jeanette Kahn laid down the law. She says, if they die in Crisis, they're dead. That's it. Nobody brings them back. But then we had this character that nobody knew who she was underneath the thing. We knew it was a mystery, but we had thought it was Supergirl. Now we're going to have to come up with what could be the mystery behind Censor Girl. And we really didn't know at the time And we didn't really know at the time I designed the costume who it was going to be. Paul came up with the Princess Projectra thing entirely on his own. I didn't have any input into that at all, so Sensor Girl, designed by me, was Paul's baby all the way as far as motivation and personality and that sort of thing. All that I brought to the personality of the character was that I wanted her to carry herself with a sense of power, and maybe in a way, this regal quality suggested Princess Projectra.
That's great. It's great. It goes to show, yeah, there was a real confusion, but they took, Levitt's smart. Got to give it to him. He took the opportunity. I'm looking back at the Adventure Comics 346 where they first appeared, and it's Karate Kid, Projectra, Pharaoh Lad, and Nemesis Kid. So this is a little bit before the Fatal Five eventually gets introduced, and then we get the death of Pharaoh Lad. But when you look at, it's so odd to hear Lytle say that he developed this costume totally separate from Projectra, because when you look at Projectra's costume in that first appearance, it's red and white, and she's got this collar and she's got these white gloves.
Oh, that's right.
It's very different from what we see her. It almost looks very Censor Girl-ish in a Silver Age way.
I wonder if that was subconscious on his part,
right? Because she has a cape. I think I read what you read at some point before. I heard that before, and but I wrote a note here because this was one of the notes that I was saving, was this notion of going back to Projectra, her first appearance in terms of her design and also of her powers. Like, I feel like her early use of powers is a little more familiar to Censor Girl than maybe some of her later stuff, but I don't know if that's concrete. And then that's all that's stuff that I guess it's being documented, this whole switcheroo thing, but I'm glad to see that it didn't disrupt too much the contents of the book itself. Do you feel that way? Do you feel it has in some way?
No. The only I guess remaining stray thought I have about this whole thing is, had it been Supergirl, what would have been the reaction from the fans? And within the story itself, the Legionnaires. That would be an interesting thought experiment to extrapolate that. Not having, obviously not having read what comes next and how that impacts everything. That will be a thought that lingers, and I'll be mulling that over as I read through this. Like I said, I would have assumed it was Supergirl. And would have wanted it to be Supergirl, but my motivations for that are totally inconsequential and has nothing to do with the direction of the story. So, but I don't know. Projector has always been kind of except for her becoming queen and everything that revolved around the Legion of Supervillains taking over Orlando and her leaving, she's always been kind of one of those background Legionnaires for me.
Mm-hmm.
And now having her thrust into the spotlight as she has been as Censor Girl, and now this reveal, now I'm very curious how this character will be, how I will take in this character.
Right.
Going forward.
Right. It's
and this is something that Levitz has been doing all along with other characters. Lightning Lass is probably the most obvious one, maybe not maybe, and also Shrinking Violet. Right. And so maybe Projector is like the next one that he's going to do something like that with.
Right.
So that that development, that progression of his characterizations, that's something that really excites me as a reader.
Yeah. I mean, it's so rare in comics where, not that Projectra has not that she's like an A-list character by any means, but where a character is one thing for decades, becomes another thing, and then that second identity supersedes anything that happened before it, right? Think of Nightwing, Dick Grayson, Nightwing. I mean, we're going to reach a point where he's going to be Nightwing longer than he's been Robin at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Barbara Gordon absolutely has been Oracle longer than she has been Batgirl, at least the Silver Age Batgirl. You know, by the time she became Oracle in the 80s, she wasn't Batgirl again until the New 52. So I don't know, you know, I figure out the math there. But, and who's the only, well, I mean, you could almost say the same thing about Wally Weston when he became Flash. I was trying to think if there were any Marvel characters that were the same way, where they started off as one thing and became another. You know, maybe Ms. Marvel becoming Captain Marvel, you know. So here's a character, Projectra, within the corner of the Legion of Superheroes, who's becoming a whole other identity. And the second identity is going to mean more to the team than the first one ever did. At least in terms of exposure, I think. Like what you were talking about. Mm-hmm. So I think that's great. I think maybe that's the other reason why, even though this storyline is not on the same level of like Great Darkness Saga, and you can't really pinpoint the exact issues where it starts and all that other stuff. I think that's why it has such a fondness in my brain anyway, because it was fun, and it's going to take this character into a new place. And now I get to read the consequences of all this. And like I said, I don't remember it. I don't remember a lot of this. I remember bits and pieces, but it's going to be really cool to see how Levitz uses this character and to see the reaction. So we'll go on that journey together when it comes to everybody else in the Legion going, Sensor Girl, who is she? Why is she? Now the question is, why Sensor Girl? We got the who. Now we need the why. So,
yep.
Yeah. Woo. It's a long time coming. Now you have a list from issue 26. We should probably. Do you want to? We're at 2 hours. Do you want to save it for next episode, or you want to?
I was thinking, we should do that. Let's talk about that stuff next time.
Great. That'll give us a little more to talk about in terms of the story and. Mm-hmm. So there's a list from issue 26 that Levitz wrote of all the clues inside on the page, like actually on the page. So we'll go through that next episode, so we can move on here in this episode. So any other thoughts on this issue?
No, I don't think so. I really dug a lot of the stuff that's in this issue. Like I said at the beginning, some of that art I really enjoyed. I don't know, just the whole thing. I think maybe, Peter, you said last time that last issue really kind of gelled for you. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel the same way with this one. Good. With this issue. So I don't know. It's just interesting that our reflections on these things, how they're turning out, I guess. Yeah. In terms of the art and the story and, just the issue as a whole.
Right. And as a wrap up to year 2 or the beginning of year 3 of this title, it kind of makes sense. This is mm-hmm. There's definitely going to be almost like a line in the sand of here's pre who is Mystery Girl and here's post who is Sensor Girl, right? Like, yeah. Yeah, so that's what I'm looking for.
It's a nice demarcation.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so let's move away from Legion of Superheroes issue 25, go to our other segment where we take a look at the Legion of Superheroes throughout the DC universe at the time when Legion of Superheroes issue 25 hit the stands, which means we're going to take a look at Who's Who issue 18 and Booster Gold number 7. We're taking a look at, in Who's Who 18, Phantom Girl, Polar Boy, Prody and Prody 2, Pulsar Stargrave, and I have some notes on Phantom Zone and Professor Ivo.
Ooh. Okay.
Did I not mention that in my notes to you?
I don't. If you did, I forgot.
Okay.
So I apologize.
No, that's all right. Let's actually start with Ivo because it's just a throwaway. So when we read the annual number 1, Who Shot Laurel Kent?
Oh, right.
And remember at the end, we were there was nothing in the story that actually dictated that the person behind the killing of all the descendants of the Justice League of America was Professor Ivo. Like they just surmised that it was one of their villains that was long lived, but they never really came out and said Professor Ivo. Now we certainly came up with that ourselves, and that's been part of the Legion lore. But I remember us talking and saying, why does everybody in a lot of stuff I found online, why do they just say straight out, well, it's Professor Ivo? Because in the book, it didn't.
Exactly.
Well, here in the Who's Who, that last little blurb, they say he was the one behind, in the 30th century, killing the descendants of the Justice League of America. So you're like, oh, okay, well, there you go. Now we finally get a definitive answer. Not from the story itself, but from Who's Who.
How weird.
Which is, they did that a lot. They dropped information every now and then. So,
it's really interesting why they would do that, right? There's just this little tidbit in one issue of Who's Who, and it becomes this lore. From our perspective now, 30 years later, it's become this lore that impacted a story that we read and talked about just relatively recently. So yeah, that's so bizarre that they would just add these little things like that,
right? And because I can't imagine,
but it's cool.
Yeah, it's totally cool. But I can't imagine Levitz wrote that entry for Professor Ivo.
Oh no,
right? Like it had to be somebody, maybe Jerry Conway or somebody a little more familiar with the Justice League. But if the Who's Who is a way to kind of make corrections and fill in the gaps, okay, fine.
Yeah.
That's what they chose to do. So that's the only reason why I threw him in there, because I thought that was a nice little connection to one of our previous conversations. Real quick, the cover for Who's Who by George Perez, and I don't have it in front of me. I think there's a different inker, but I can't remember if it's Giordano or not.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, great. Okay, good. My memory's pretty good then. When it comes to Perez, sometimes I actually remember those things. Polar Boy's on the front. Pulsar Stargrave has kind of like a nice little place on the cover. Prody, you can see the two Prodys riding Plastic Man, which is kind of funny. And then Phantom Girl is being chased by General Zod, half Phantom, half in our reality. So not much in terms of the cover with the entries that we're going to go through, but I just thought I'd shout them out real quick. And the letter column for this issue, they do mention the Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes. And I love, this is totally a tangent, I love that they call out Dick Giordano for not including Prez in this volume.
Yeah.
Because people wanted Prez. And Dick Jones was like, nah, that's all right. I thought that was funny.
Yeah. As they say, please be aware that it was a hotly debated entry. Just the internal machinations of things like this, right? It's just that I find that stuff kind of fascinating.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. Phantom Girl, Polar Boy, Prody 2, Pulsar Stargrave. Where do you want to go? You just want to go in order? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah. Did you had Phantom Zone on there as a question mark? Did we not want to touch on that one?
I did. I mean, really the only thing, they mentioned Mon-El, but that's kind of it. I didn't really have any other notes on it. Did you have anything about the Phantom Zone entry? We could start there since it's little.
Yeah, that was the thing. I was just trying to figure out what the connection would be. Obviously, the Mon-El one is the big one, but there's also a story. This ties into Phantom Girl, where she is able to, I can't remember the issue now, and I didn't write it down. She's able to go into the Phantom Zone.
Oh, right.
Just because this was something that happened in the Adventure Comics era. So it was already established that she could do that.
Right.
And yeah, didn't you ask that question about the issue where Mon-El was put back in the zone temporarily?
Yeah, 23. When we had that discussion, one of us mentioned like, oh, she's like, oh yeah, and I'm gonna just engage that little side wrinkle in my powers, and I'm just gonna go right into the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
And we were both like,
Okay.
oh, is okay. Didn't know she could do that. But
yeah, so when I was earlier when I mentioned I was flipping through the Adventure Comic stuff, it was because of the Phantom Girl entry that caused me to do that, and that's where I found whatever issue it was that I came across.
Probably 323, maybe.
That sounds about right.
1964, art by John Fort. That she can just enter and exit the Phantom Zone. So that was an established power. So that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
It makes me wonder, and I guess we're going back to Phantom Girl.
That's fine.
It makes me wonder if she, besides being able to go from her native dimension to ours, or the Legions, and the Phantom Zone, is that have they shown her being able to do that with other dimensions as well? Is that really her power? Is not to become immaterial, but to transverse dimensional frequencies and go into other areas? Because that would really make her her power set to be much more interesting than just becoming a phantom.
I think when we talked about the Time Trapper, remember there was that one story where a way to get around the Iron Curtain of time was to go through Phantom Girl's homeworld. I think her home dimension. It was something like that. So it's a fair deduction that her powers should be able to. I kind of like that the only reason she can go through the Phantom Zone is because of the Phantom connection, right? Like that's really the only reason, because they live and exist as phantoms. If she could be able to do that dimensionally, it kind of makes her powers more into transportation or teleportation rather than a phantom. Now, what could be interesting is if she could go into, the metaphysical world of like a purgatory or some kind of hellscape or something.
Well, okay. Let's jump back to the Phantom Zone, because this is the one thing that I learned about the Phantom Zone that I did not know about, was that it is the realm of the creature Ether.
Mm-hmm.
Had no idea. So if that's the case, then it's almost as if she, if you think of the Phantom Zone as some sort of limbo or hell dimension or whatever, then that is ruled by this demonic looking creature. That seems to suppose that she can do something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting connection. So does that mean that her native, and I always hate trying to pronounce her native dimension
because
or planet or whatever. Yeah. But does that mean that it's somehow connected to Ether's realm in some way, or it's I don't know. It is. I have more questions than I have answers here. Thanks a lot, Who's Who.
That's the issue. I referenced that issue of DC Comics Presents in that Mon-El story from Legion of Superheroes 23. It was DC Comics Presents 97. I don't even think it had shipped when this Who's Who came out, or maybe it did, where Rick Veitch, who did the entry for Phantom Zone in this Who's Who issue, he does a story kind of like the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, where he just creates a final story for the Phantom Zone and the villains, and that's where this creature comes about. It might have some connections to the Phantom Zone. Wasn't there a Phantom Zone miniseries, the 3-issue miniseries from like the late 70s, early 80s? It might have some connections to that, but when I read that last DC Comics Presents issue, because I thought maybe it might have something to do with Mon-El, but it really didn't. That's where this whole thing is like, oh, it's a dimension with a creature, and oh, that's weird. And it actually has to do with like Superman in the future, where Earth gets destroyed. It's a what if issue, But then they take it and put it here in Who's Who, and you're like, all right, maybe there's more to it. Maybe there was a previous connection, but I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
so.
The last paragraph of the Phantom Zone entry is the exact fate of the zone and Ether's entire realm remains unknown, but there is another story to be told, and soon. So it suggests to me that this Who's Who maybe came out before that DC Comics Presents issue.
Yeah, or they just knew that Byrne's Superman was coming.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Very, very strange. One of the big takeaways for this Phantom Girl entry, Jaime Hernandez doing the artwork.
Yeah.
How great is that?
Yeah. Especially the image of her in her earlier costume. I don't know, it just looks beautiful to me.
I mean, totally right out of Love and Rockets and Locusts, Maggie Hopi, all that stuff. And the Who's Who did that a lot. They brought in some independent, at the time, artists. I mean, the very next page of Who's Who is Phantom Lady by Dave Stevens, very, very cool. Very cool.
Sorry, was there anything else about Phantom Girl? Because she's one of your favorites, right?
She is, yeah. An unexplainable favorite, outside of maybe just that she looks like Donna Troy. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I have a thing for dark-haired girls, I guess.
Well, so like I said, I don't know if you were about to move on, but
no, I had some notes for her.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Just quick things here. I think her title logo is kind of the design of the title logo is okay. She began the longest consecutive membership in the team's history. That's well documented. And her appearance in Action 276 is also the first appearance of Triplicate Girl, Shrinking Violet, Bouncing Boy, Sunboy, and Brainiac 5. Created by Jerry Siegel, Jim Mooney, 1961. We always have that question, who's first, Triplicate Girl or Phantom Girl, outside of the big three. Most places give it to Triplicate Girl, and they say that Phantom Girl is the fifth member. But there's also a little bit of continuity confusion, because when the Legion first appears, there are other members.
Right.
And they just don't get defined until later. And then there's something about there's an argument that Supergirl actually joined before Superboy because of the...
That's right.
Yeah, it's all kind of craziness, right? So I just sort of say, look, the second or third appearance of the Legion of Superheroes, they said they were the kids of the originals. So the whole beginning of that story is kind of messy. So I'll just take it for what it is.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things that I was looking through my omnibuses for was, well, when do we for sure see Phantom Girl, and possibly when do we see someone who suggests that, or that is suggested that it is Phantom Girl, so to speak, before she's truly identified. And I didn't really find anything definitive there. Plus, I forgot to actually write down the issue numbers, but. The other thing that I was looking for was, because they say here that this faith in Ultra Boy became the beginning of one of the great Legion romances, and so I was curious when that started. How far back was this relationship? And again, I didn't write down the issue numbers, although I did find the stuff, but there was a story. So I apologize to the listeners that I'm not on my game here, but there was a story where Ultra Boy, one of the many times that the Legionnaires it looked like that he had betrayed the Legion, or in fact, in this case, it was revealed that he was a criminal. It turns out that he wasn't, but it was just this elaborate ploy for him to get the bad guys. But anyway, she professes her faith in him as a Legionnaire, and from that, and then several issues later, there's an issue where Brainiac 5 goes on a tirade against Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad and Ultra Boy and Phantom Girl because they're smooching all the time. And how dare they? This is serious Legion business, and we have no time for romance. So anyway, so yes, I did corroborate that their relationship is a pretty long-lived one, but it's no more long-lived than, say, Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad.
Yeah, I like I said, didn't really have much outside of the artwork, and I don't know. Maybe one day I'll just go through and do what you did and read all these Phantom Girl stories and go, why do I like her? I don't know.
Well, I've always liked her too. It doesn't hurt that she is paired up with one of my favorite Legionnaires. But when I guess maybe going back to some of the stuff that we've read recently with her, that whole idea of, Joe took a peek under Sensor Girl's costume last issue, and this issue, it's hardly worth noting, but given that it's Phantom Girl, she as Alter Boy is explaining what he did, there's a couple of times where it's like she objects to him in front of everybody. Joe, you shouldn't. Joe, don't do that, basically. And I thought, well, that's kind of a weird reaction from her, given that he's already done it. She was with him, and there has been some time that's passed, at least half a day, where they were probably together, and if she objected to him doing that, she would have voiced that to him already. Anyway, so I'm just, for some reason, I just like these two together, and I like to see the relationship thing, beyond the fact that they are simply just boyfriend girlfriend, that there's actually some sort of, relationship there, that it's not just this really simplistic one,
right.
That we normally see with these characters. Anyway.
Okay, next up, Polar Boy. I think this is a great entry art-wise.
Well, it is Steve Lytle.
Steve Lytle. Love the way he looks. Love the stance. I love all the background stuff. I think the background stuff is really smart.
I love that. That's the best thing about this.
Yeah. The split of his costume, the split of his teams between the Legion and the subs. We get to see his face without the skull cap. His mission monitor board symbol. I mean, just everything about it is great. There wasn't much I got in the way from the text, but I think the imagery is fantastic.
Yeah. Polar Boy has, ever since his admission to the team, has been to me one of those, this character has great potential. Being a former sub member, wanting to be, for the longest time, be a member of the team, and now is a member of the team, what comes next with this character? And so far, I have to say I've been a little disappointed, because he's been, I think, mostly sidelined for a lot of this. There's good reasons story-wise, but I keep thinking there should be a spotlight on him, more of a spotlight on him as a Legion member, and what does that mean? And let's explore more of the relationships he has with these other Legionnaires, whom he has known because of his former sub membership. So please, God, let there be more with Polar Boy.
I also love the thing in his power description, right? He's like, personal combat training without distinction.
Yeah.
Ouch. Kind of a lot.
Well, I think a lot of the Legionnaires actually have something along those lines too. So it's not just him.
It's a nice little running gag.
Yeah. Although I guess, Phantom Girl just simply says has completed personal combat training, but that may be more of a, well, no, I guess they could have changed the art, but no, it looks like, inch column wise, Polar Boy has just a tiny bit more space in his text. So maybe they had to cut that out of Phantom Girl, or maybe, like you say, it's more of a commentary on Polar Boy.
Prody and Prody 2.
Yes.
I have here, I really think the way Prody 2 has bucked the idea that he's just a mascot and he becomes a
Mm-hmm.
political revolutionary. First of all, it's hilarious and also brilliant at the same time. That he's just not going to settle being Chameleon Boy, the second one anyway. Especially, it's almost like he kind of saw what happened to the first one. He's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not sacrificing my life for somebody. I'm either going to be a member of this, a member of the Legion of Super Pets. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to try to get sentient rights for my people. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what an awesome jump from what the original Prody was to this politically active leader of potential leader of a people. And I've commented before, whenever the subplot involving the Proteans has come up in these issues, it's like, well, when are we going to actually get some sort of either focus on or resolution of that plot line? So I'm looking forward to that as well.
If they even do anything, I don't
Exactly. Yeah. That's the other thing is like, well, is this going to be one of those subplots that just never goes anywhere, never gets resolved?
Well, think about it. They could have done the whole founder changeling thing way before Deep Space Nine if they really wanted to.
Oh my God. That's right.
I mean, if they weren't such a benevolent sort of sedated, that's not the word I really want, but they're just, remember that first story when you even got to meet them the first time? They're like, oh, look how cute, these little circles, these little, white nondescript circles. Oh, when the water comes, they become fish, Oh, when there's bad weather, they become birds, but in reality, they could take over everything if they wanted to.
What if they were, instead of clones, for the Dark Circle of what is it, 5 or 6 members, or people, creatures, aliens? What if it were the Proteans instead?
Oh my! The description is great. For a Protean, he has great charisma. That's brilliant. This is a great entry.
And I don't think it says here, but I read somewhere. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. That so it talks about how Proteans have limited telepathic abilities, so they can communicate. But I think I read somewhere recently that Proty 2 actually develops the power of speech.
Seems like it could be a possibility. Absolutely.
Yeah. In fact, it said something specifically about forming a larynx so that he could talk.
Oh, wow. Curious. I don't have the page. Is it Giffen on the artwork? Did we say that?
It's Giffen and Joe Rubinstein.
Okay. All right.
And you get a classic Giffen image of using lots of shadows and showing Chameleon Boy with Prody 1 on his shoulder, as he often was depicted back when Prody 1 was alive.
Okay, let's go to Pulsar Stargrave, one of the more enigmatic villains of the Legion, because no one can figure out what the hell his origin is. Yeah. And even the Who's Who doesn't try to figure it out.
Yeah, was he Brainiac? Was he Descendant? Was he what was he?
Was he Brainiac 5's father?
Yeah, all that. Yeah, just that whole thing we had talked about Pulsar Stargrave because he appeared in the Legion Annual,
the substitute special.
Or was it the special?
Yeah, remember he got his nose bit
off. That's right. Yes. Okay. And you may recall, listeners may recall, I was not very pleased with that because of the way that Giffen made him a joke. Because Pulsar Stargrave, when I first came into reading the Legion in the late 70s, early 80s, I was getting as many back issues as I could afford, and one of the issues I got featured Pulsar Stargrave, and also kind of the mystery surrounding him, who he was and what he could do and all that kind of stuff. And I've always been intrigued by this character. And part of that intrigue or that interest is because we don't really know who he is or what his motivations are and what's he trying to accomplish, which on one hand, yes, that can be a weakness because they don't know what to do with the character, so they keep introducing these things about him and adding on to it all these layers, and because there's really nothing there, which that's probably what's going on. But for some reason, I have this appreciation for the character, so I didn't care for the substitute hero's take, Giffen's humor hoisted onto him. Anyway, that's just my little hang up on this character.
I mean, they mentioned in the description, he's a contemporary or on the level of a Mordru and a time trapper. That's pretty huge.
Right. And yet I don't think, I will admit I have not read every appearance of this character, but that's not the assessment I would lay on him. I think he likes to think of himself at that level, but I don't see it.
And Giffen probably looked at his design and was like, okay, I know Mike Grell was very popular, but the bell-bottom thing and the that's got to go. So he probably looked at the character and was like, no, I don't, no,
yeah,
no, thank you.
But I love the art here. Keith Pollard, Willie Blyberg. That's just lovely looking art here on this page. Bell bottoms and all.
Yeah, it's a pretty big entry for such a sort of minor character.
That's true. Yeah.
Created by Jim Shooter and Mike Grell. Okay. Well, that's Who's Who number 18. We will continue our trek through Who's Who. In a couple of episodes, we may even include, I think I mentioned this to you in our breakdown of upcoming episodes for the Legion Project, Eric. We might include some other DC-centric titles that spotlight certain characters every now and then. So when we get there, we'll let you know. Mm-hmm. Just a little tease for now. All right, and then lastly, Booster Gold 7. We had a big conversation in the last episode, Booster Gold 6, because of this idea of we are post-crisis, but the Superman that is in Booster Gold 6 and 7 is clearly not the Byrne version just yet, but he's also not technically the pre-crisis. He's like this limbo Superman. Some of that doesn't really play into this issue. It's just a conclusion of the adventure from issue number 6, where Booster Gold finds himself out in space for the first time and gets caught up in the confusion of an alien culture's civil war or mutiny or whatever you want to call it. But we get some quick little things. I mean, we get the Legion flight ring on Booster Gold's hand. It's not mentioned, but it is shown. Last issue, Superman didn't even recognize the damn thing. But what we get here is we get more of that idea post-crisis that time is not an easy thing to navigate. We got it in the Time Trapper stuff with Legionnaires 3, I think a tiny bit. And then we also got it in the Mon-El issue from issue number 23, where they had to go back to Superboy's time, but they were noticing that time is just fluctuating. It's just acting not normal. And Skeets even says it here again, and he puts a name to it, which is great. He says he references the great time void that begins in 1986.
Yeah.
So now we're putting a year to it, which is cool.
That was the bit out of that issue, which, by the way, I quite enjoyed that issue overall.
Oh, cool.
Just the whole the opposition of Superman versus Booster Gold, right, and their approach to that situation. I thought that was really well done. But just in terms of Legion connection, that great time void line really stuck out to me, and so that's the thing I got out of that issue in terms of the Legion. And so what does that mean? Is that just again building on what the stuff that we've already talked about that you mentioned just now? How much communication was there going on between Jurgens and the Legion team, and was DC really trying to make uniform what the timeline was for their line at that time? I thought that was, it implies a certain amount of planning, or at least on some people's parts, right. What all that means. So I thought that was really, there's not much there, but maybe deftly done, perhaps.
Yeah. And we talked about it could play out here in Booster Gold because he's a creature of time. It could play out in Legion of Superheroes. We obviously had that weird little crossover into Hex, which takes place in DC's future. I mean, DC was no stranger to doing like some sort of editorial mandate. Certainly when it came to Justice Society. Post-Crisis, you really didn't get appearances or mentions of Justice Society of America, because whether they were trying to figure out exactly how to fit them into the continuity, or they were waiting for the history of the DC universe, or they just wanted to focus on the future, right? The present day of these characters, or the future of these characters, not the 30th century future, but just what was DC going to be like post-Crisis,
Right.
So it makes sense that maybe there was also the mandate of, look, we can no longer be going back and forth through dimensions, number one, parallel Earths, but we also can't do it with time. No more going to the Great Disaster, no more going to the future, with the Legion of Superheroes. We can't have if the Reverse Flash is from the 25th century, we can't have all these other characters also go to the 25th century and it looks completely different. They wanted to really streamline things. So I like it. I like that they're really paying attention to it in these few titles. And that's one of the things I like about digging back into these stories. Superman even asks Skeets, is what Booster Gold being here from the future, is he supposed to be here? And Skeets says, yes, it is. Even though Booster doesn't know, it is well established that there was a Booster Gold in the 20th century. Each man must feel that he controls his destiny, that he is creating history, not fulfilling it. And that seems to appease Superman a little bit there.
Which I thought was kind of curious, that he takes this machine's word for it. But that was Superman.
Yeah.
Of course, Skeets is also the most reliable narrator in the Booster Gold comic. So,
and it goes to show that this Superman, again, he feels older. He feels more established, I guess I really should say, that he would take Skeet's word for that, that he has experience out in space and galaxies. Even Lois Lane we get an appearance by her, is clearly not Byrne's Lois Lane.
Oh yeah.
She looks like the 80s pre-crisis Lois Lane with that straight black hair just coming down. Her wardrobe is very not Byrne. She feels like a Dick Giordano character more than anything. Or that 2-issue Lois Lane series that comes out in the 80s at the time. Like, there's just a lot of clues that you're like, yeah, this is still. Now, what's interesting is that confrontation, that comparison between the two characters, Superman and Booster Gold that you mentioned, will play out in a Byrne Action Comics issue. So even though this isn't technically the Byrne Superman, their history still stays. And it's in Action Comics 594, which doesn't come out for, a number of months later, where Byrne even on the cover, he does a flip of this cover. So instead of Superman beating on Booster Gold is beating on Superman. and their history is referenced again. So might be fun to, whenever, like I said, it doesn't come out for a while, but just touch on it a tiny bit. I don't think it has any Legion connection, but it's kind of fun. So yeah, weird little DC limbo time going on here, but with some groundwork for a future Legion and Superman story.
Mm-hmm. Is this also the Great Time Void that begins in 1986? Is this also a reference to or precursor for the Cosmic Boy miniseries?
I think so, yeah. Which we're gonna.
Is it? Do you think it's that direct?
I do. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the Cosmic Boy miniseries has connections to Legends. It has connections to obviously Legionnaires 3. And it does have a direct connection to this time void. Not to spoil anything, but Cosmic Boy very quickly in the opening pages realizes that, from what I remember, time is not right. The past is not right. So that's the kickoff of the entire Cosmic Boy miniseries.
So that means DC Comics at the time that Booster Gold was number 7 was being created. They already knew where they were heading with the whole timeline, Legion, Superboy stuff.
Yep. Yeah, and we got that. What was it in issue 23 when he and Night Girl were going away? Right, when they took the bubble to go back in time. Like, that was the setup for it. So yeah, right. And we're gonna have in Booster Gold 8 and 9. The origin of Booster Gold featuring the Legion of Superheroes. So we definitely will have to cover those issues. And I'm not sure if they mentioned anything about the time, but I guess we'll find out. Okay. Are we done for this episode, I think?
I think we are.
Yeah. Coming back into an anniversary issue, issue 25, and just after our own 3rd year anniversary, going into our 4th year now. Yeah, you got a chunky episode. So, all right. So onward to issue 26. I believe we have 2 more issues, 26 and 27, to wrap up the Sensor Girl stuff. Definitely, this was fun getting back to this again. I hope the listeners had fun listening. Please email us, peter@thedailyrios.com or
longboxreview@gmail.com.
We want to hear your feedback, not only on this episode, but on future episodes as well. Eric, any other thoughts?
Nope. I think we've exhausted this issue, but man, I'm excited to read the next 2 for sure.
Awesome. Me too. Always a pleasure talking, Eric. This was fun.
Yep.
And as always, long live the Legion Project Podcast. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.